Yeah, we need to have the ability to come together. We need to stay connected. It's important to know what is going on in our industry that way.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome back to the program, everyone. Dustin Harris hanging out once again with you. Got a wonderful guest coming up. Can't wait to introduce you. First, want to pause here, remind you that we're sponsored by 3 great companies. One, of course, being Alamode. Alamode, of course, is the software that I use for my form billing and so much more. Check them out. Go to alamode.com, or you can pick up the old phone. You remember that? Pick up the phone and dial the number 800 Alamode. Talk to a real person, folks. It's 800 Alamode or alamode.com. Data Master, of course, is saving you time, saving you money. And boy, folks, it comes down to about 45 minutes per report. Think about that. If you could save 30 to 45 minutes per report, would it be worth it to you? DatamasterUSA.com, DatamasterUSA.com. Finally, we are sponsored by OREP Insurance. OREP, of course, is the E&O that I am using in my appraisal business. You should be as well. OREP.org is where you find out more. Again, it's OREP.org. Welcome back to the program. Good friend of mine, a good friend of the program, Mr. Bryan Reynolds. He comes to us from, do you actually live in Kentucky, Bryan, or do you live in Tennessee?
I live in Kentucky, but I'm in Tennessee a lot.
Gotcha. Okay. Kind of a border dweller then, right?
Yeah. We bought a condo in Nashville a couple of years ago. So it's kind of my second home. You know, I'm there a lot. And when I'm there, I'll stay there. When I'm not, I'll do an Airbnb, but born, raised, and live in a little town called Owensboro, Kentucky. Love
it, my friend. Well, Bryan, of course, is the partner at Appraiser eLearning. He's a popular speaker and USPAP instructor across the nation. He's the host of the Appraisal Update podcast and the chief appraiser at Reynolds and Associates. Bryan, welcome back to the program, my friend. I love it when you're on.
Thanks, Dustin. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm always excited to talk to you.
If I had to narrow it down, Bryan, I would say that you're one of the best communicators out there. Truly, you really are.
Thank you.
A great guy to talk to.
Your check's in the mail, Dustin. So I appreciate the kind words.
Speaking of communication, talk to us about this podcast, because obviously people that are on my podcast right now listening to you are podcast aficionados. They're always looking for new things to listen to learn about. Your podcast, the Appraisal Update podcast. Talk to us about that. What is that?
Yeah, so that was an idea one of my partners had that we just, once a week we have a conversation, and sometimes it's a conversation like you're having today with a guest. Other times it's just kind of me having a conversation with my audience, just giving my thoughts, what's going on. I like real world examples. I love watching movies based on true events or real life. And I love telling real stories. I think they're so much better than anything we could dream up because there's some really interesting real world events. So I like sharing those. And that's pretty much the gist of it. It's unscripted. It can go anywhere. And we have a lot of fun with it, and hopefully provide a little value to the listening community as well.
Long before I was an appraiser, I learned that people love stories. They do, and they love true stories. And I found that even though we provide a lot of content on the Appraiser Coach podcast, a lot of detail as to how to do this and how to do that, our most popular episodes are still what we call appraiser stories, where I'm simply talking to Joe Blow appraiser in the Midwest, talking about his or her experience growing up in the business and what they do on a daily basis. And we talk about a funny story and an interesting story, and people love it.
Yeah, I think so too. I just got back from the ACTS conference, the Appraisal Conference and Trade Show down in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. We had a great time, Dustin, and it just shows that the appraisal community is ready to come back together. We need to be safe. We're not done with it yet, but I think we see the finish line. I think we're coming out of it, and we had a record attendance. And then one day we had a mock trial. I put together this mock trial.
Yeah, I heard about this.
And we had a judge come in, with a robe and a gavel. We had an attorney, we had an investigator. We were in court.
That's awesome.
And we had fun with it, but I think we got a good message across to the appraisers that were in attendance. So we had a good time with that. Yeah, it was fun.
So let's talk about that. I think human beings, not just appraisers, but human beings have this innate need to be connected with other human beings. Let's talk about that on an appraisal scale, though, because it's always a challenge. You've heard me talk about the appraisal cave. I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but we really do find ourselves a little bit isolated.
Yeah, and it's in part, I think. I mean, if we look at what the definition of an appraiser is, It's one who is independent.
Hmm.
And sometimes we're so independent, we can't come together. I tease frequently that my 84-year-old mother's red hat club is more organized than the appraisal community. and it's kind of true. Someone said once, motorcycle clubs are more organized than appraisers. And if you think about it, look across the country and look at all the, motorcycle rallies that they have.
Right.
When are appraisers around other appraisers? Typically once a year when they're in their CE class, and that's
maybe. And we're finding, Bryan, and you know this. I mean, you run Appraiser eLearning, and what an awesome thing that technology is to bring us together. Like you and I right now. You're sitting at your home. I'm sitting at my home. We're thousands of miles apart, yet we're in the same room, right? But there's something about being in person in the same energy field as someone else, right?
Absolutely. The virtual technology, the Zoom calls and the classes that you can take virtually now has helped. I think that's helped weather the storm, if you will. But humans need to be around humans, and we are social animals, and we need to be social. And being cooped up in the house and your mask on and not communicating. They say that the young generation, the kids, that they really have social anxiety. And I struggle with that. I'm like, how can these children they're always on their phone. They're the most social creatures I've ever seen. They're always on their phone, but yet they can't do what you and I are doing right now.
Right.
They can't have a conversation, and meeting in person is really hard and difficult for them, which amazes me. I thought when the phones that you could communicate and look at each other, do the FaceTime. I thought, well, we're in George Jetson finally, right? And people are going to love that.
Right.
And yet they don't do it, because that's too social. They can text really good.
Oh yeah.
And they can get on these other social media platforms, but they don't want to talk. I've had some former employees that, I'm like, call this client, I'll go back in. So what they say, well, I don't know. I emailed them. I'm waiting for a response. I'm like, pick up the phone and call them.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation.
Right.
So yeah, we need to have the ability to come together. We need to stay connected. It's important to know what is going on in our industry that way.
I do a lot of things wrong as a father, but one of the things I've really tried to do right is to allow my children, and I've got 4 kids, and they all come with a different social skill. My 16-year-old is pretty introverted. My oldest daughter is pretty out there, pretty drama queen, if you will. And this idea of each of them come with their own personalities. But one of the things that I've really tried as a father to do is to put on their shoulders this skill, if you will, that they need to learn. I can't give that to them, but I can give them opportunity to utilize that skill. I'll give you a quick example. My son, my youngest, 13, sold a dirt bike a couple of weeks ago, and grown man comes to pick up the dirt bike, and he wants me to negotiate. I said, dude, this is your dirt bike. I'll stand it, but you're doing the negotiation. And he did. And he
Awesome.
did. And frankly, he got top dollar for the damn thing, and I probably would have caved, and but here's the thing. This world of, you're exactly right. You nailed it. The technology, quote unquote, brings us together. And yet there is something about being connected. And I think I want to dive into this a little bit more, Bryan, because I think you kind of almost tongue in cheek, almost as a joke, but I think there's something to it. This whole idea of the appraisal community kind of takes it to the next level. Why is that?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. There are platforms out there where appraisers have, and let's face it, we as appraisers, we're very opinionated, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
we all have opinions about something. And a lot of appraisers have very strong opinions about their opinion. So we've seen, some of the social media platforms, Facebook, and way back when, prior to that, the bulletin boards, right? And you'd see where, there'd be some heated dialogue, heated conversation in those platforms. And I always say, go to the authoritative source. If you're having a discussion or argument about FHA, go to FHA, look up the 4000.1 or the appraisal report and data delivery guide. You can normally find your answer there. If it's a USPAP issue, pull up USPAP, let's take a look at it. But, I think we're starting to turn a curve. Like I said, we had a record attendance there. I am having people come up and say, hey, I listened to your podcast. I'm like, oh, really? I've got to listen there. And it's refreshing to hear that. So I'm president of the National Association of Appraisers currently, and we just reinstated our print publication of our trade magazine called the Appraisal Focus. It was extremely well received. And these are all ways that we can kind of stay connected and know what what our peers are doing, what's coming around the corner with UAD or new forms or whatever's rapidly about to change. So I think appraisers are finally starting to do a better job with that. I don't know. Are you on Clubhouse, Dustin?
No, I've seen this floating around. I'll be honest with you, man. I just have not had time to look into it. It's kind of one of those back burner things. Tell me about that, because I've seen more than one post on Facebook about it. Yeah.
So I tell you, let me shut this thing down. I'm sorry. Clubhouse is new. I'm new to it, but we got on. It's strictly audio, so it's having a conversation like we are now. And I was teaching down in South Carolina recently, and I was trying to get appraisers to get involved, right? Join an association, participate in some of these social media platforms. Get on. I'm a LinkedIn guy, so I'm kind of on LinkedIn, and I've got the Facebook stuff, but I'm not a big Facebook guy, right? LinkedIn to me is a little bit more professional, and so I'm on there with regularity. So I heard about this Clubhouse, and Dustin was in Myrtle Beach teaching, and I was trying to put images up, get involved, get on Instagram, get on Facebook, get on LinkedIn. And I was trying to search to find a Clubhouse icon or something. And when I pulled it up, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse came up. No, that's not the one. That's not the one. So Clubhouse is this app, and right now it's just on iPhones, but it's coming to Android as well. And it's a private club. It's not really so, my buddy Bobby Crisp down there in Texas said, well, I'm not a social media guy. I said, well, this isn't social media. It's a private club. And so you download the app, you put your information in, and then you're kind of in a waiting mode until someone can kind of vouch for you. And they'll confirm you or verify you, and then you're brought into the Clubhouse.
Well, I'm out, and there's nobody going to verify.
Nobody. I'll confirm you. You're fine. We'll get
All right, I'll send the check back then.
So I created it. John Dingaman and I said, let's have a conversation with an appraiser and an AMC, and we'll see if anybody wants to listen in. Right. So we created this little club, and it's called Real Estate Appraisal Talk. All right, that's the name of the club. We've got about 200 members right now, which is kind of cool.
Oh, okay.
And it's growing every day. And so we've got a schedule. So we said on Mondays at 3:00 Central Standard Time, we've got 2 trainees that host a room called Real Estate Appraisal Trainee Talk. And they talk about trainee stuff, ideas or suggestions of how you might secure a mentor or supervisor. Instead of calling them and saying, hey, I need you, that's probably not the good approach, right? You ought to call and say what you can do for the supervisor or the mentor, or the business owner. And anyway, they give great ideas and tips and tricks. John and I have a little session on Wednesdays at 4:00 Central Standard Time, and it's just appraisal talk, anything appraisal. We've talked about highest and best use. We've talked about increasing markets. Should we be making market condition adjustments? Quite frankly, if one of your listeners is listening, if you're marking increasing on page 1 of the URAR, and you're using a 10 or 11 month old sale and you're not making a time adjustment, you're kind of contradicting yourself. Yeah. So be careful with that. So we talk about anything valuation related, Dustin. And then Tim Anderson's just agreed to do one on Tuesdays for us. We're calling it Tuesdays with Tim.
You should add a tacos, Tuesday tacos.
I like that. So it's just a new platform. And if you're an appraiser that doesn't want to talk, you don't have to, so it's set up to where, like, if you and I were in the room right now, you and I would be on stage, and this conversation might be being broadcast. And then anybody that came into the room would be in the audience. And at any given time, they could raise their hand. We'll bring them up on stage, and they can participate in the communication. But you're not sending pictures, you're not sending text. It's strictly an audio platform. It's pretty cool. I got to get you in there.
Very cool. We're talking with Bryan Reynolds, and of course, he is a partner at Appraiser eLearning, very popular speaker and USPAP instructor, as you can tell. Great guy to talk to. When we get back from the break, Bryan, I want to talk a little bit more about communication and what it's going to take to bring this world together. In fact, I might even throw out the old third rail question as to why can't we come together in some kind of a lobbyist group? So we'll deal with that after the break. I want to pause here, folks, and remind you that we're sponsored by 3 great companies. And by the way, these companies have been with us from the very beginning. We're going on 6 years with the Appraiser Coach podcast, and these great sponsors have been with us from the very beginning. And these are companies that I don't have any issue endorsing because they're all about what I talk about. It's efficiency, it's effectiveness, it's safety and security, it's doing the things that appraisers are doing. Let's talk for example. You all need it, right? You got to have Why not have the best company out there? Now, there's a lot of great companies out there, folks. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. I want you to click on the benefits tab, and I just want you to peruse the different benefits there. There's a lot of companies out there. I guarantee, because I've looked at them, there's no other company that will give you more benefit than what OREP will give you. I've been with them for several years and couldn't be happier. It's orep.org, OREP.org. A la mode, saving appraisers tons and tons of time. I was just on a call this morning with Joel Baker, and just talking about a few things that I would like to see changed in a la mode. And here's the thing, Joel listened. Joel said, I think we can do that. I'll go to my engineer and I'll get back to you. And I know he will. That's the kind of company they are. That's why I stay with them, alamode.com or 800 Alamode. Finally, we're sponsored by Datamaster, and Datamaster is saving you time. Can you imagine all of that time that you spend typing into the report, that being automated? That's what technology can do for you, folks, and that's what Datamaster can do for you. If you've not checked them out lately, check them out. If you say, well, Dustin, I looked at it a year ago and they weren't in my area, look again. They've expanded. There's all kinds of areas that they're in. There's very few areas that they're not in. DatamasterUSA.com, DatamasterUSA.com. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. We're talking with my good friend, Bryan Reynolds, and we're talking about communication. We're talking about connectiveness. We're talking about networking. We're talking about being a human. Bryan, the struggle, I think is twofold. And correct me if I'm wrong. You deal with a lot of appraisers, and you spend probably more time in front of appraisers live and in person than I do. And I'm curious your thoughts on this, because what comes to mind is there's a couple things we're dealing with. First of all, there's a certain creature, if you will, that is drawn to the appraisal profession, right? It is somebody who is opinionated, and I mean, I hate to say it, but we don't like to be wrong. And I think that some of the reason we don't connect is we may have questions just like anybody else does, right? But to put yourself out there and to be vulnerable and say, hey, I got a question about this. They don't want to be attacked. They don't want to be made fun of. They don't want to be looked at as not quite there. And so we hold back. Do you see that at all with the people you associate with?
We used to see that a lot. And I'm hoping that we are starting to become more kind to one another.
Yeah.
On my podcast, we do a webinar too once a month called the Appraisal Report webinar, and we will have guests on that. And I tell them up front, Dustin, hard questions are allowed.
Good.
Right? If I have a live audience, I want them to be able to ask whatever they want, and a difficult or an uncomfortable question is welcomed. You just need to do that in a professional, polite, civil manner. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you and I can agree to disagree. But let's just be kind. Let's be professional here, right? And I think I'm seeing more of that happening now. There's been, I'll give you an example. When the AMCs came out, right? And they've been around forever, but when they really came out hot and heavy during the HVCC, yep. And that was going to sunset, and good old Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act came, commonly referred to as Dodd-Frank, mm-hmm. and that kind of kept that momentum alive. And I was on the. Give you an example. I was at a conference in Las Vegas, and they had a panel of AMC folks up there, right? Only AMC representation up there. And I walked into the room, and it sounded like all of these appraisers had gotten called into the principal's office, right? and they were being talked to.
Right.
And actually, a friend of mine was the moderator, and he was walking around with a microphone. And he started saying, appraisal reports are just too long. You guys, your appraiser, you say the same thing 5 times. You'll say exposure time on page 1. You'll say it in your text addendum, and then you'll say it in a use back. And while I don't disagree with that, right? I finally raised my hand, and he said, no, all right. And he was walking around to hand me the microphone. I'm like, I really don't need that. But he handed me the microphone. And I said, with all due respect, I don't have a question for you. And I turned my back to the panel of speakers up there.
I love this.
And I faced the appraisal attendees, right? The audience. And Dustin, there were 500 appraisers sitting there.
Wow.
And I said, I have a question for the appraisers. I said, hey, appraisers, how many of you work with AMCs? And not all, but the majority of hands went up, right? They raised their hands. I said, all right, great, put your hands in. And then I said, hey, appraisers, how many of you feel like engagement letters are too long? And every hand went up, right? And I handed the mic, and there was dead silence in the room. I mean, you couldn't hear anything. And I'm like, oh God, they're going to kill me, Yeah. And I'm walking off, and one guy said, yeah, I got a 40-page engagement letter the other day. They started. Well, the next year they had their panel, and they didn't just have a panel of AMC folks up there. They had an AMC, they had a banker, and they invited me, as an appraiser. Mm-hmm. And so we had, a good mix of panelists this time. And I'll remember the banker said, it's a circle of love. It's a circle. The bank orders through the AMC, and the AMC goes to the appraiser, and then the appraiser goes back to the AMC, and then it goes back to. So it's just a big circle, and it's a circle of love. And I said, well, I'm not sure that we're ever going to love one another, but
it's a circle of something.
I think we need to agree that we need to try and get along. Right. We just need to try and get along and be professional and do the best we can. I think every appraiser listening would admit or acknowledge there's some AMCs better to work with than others. Yeah. And Dustin, to be fair, I bet there's an AMC or two out there listening right now that's thinking, there's some appraisers better to work with than others. So it goes both ways. And I think that folks are trying to be kind. I think here's what I really think. I think appraisers, for the first time in a long, long time, have a thirst for knowledge.
I agree.
They're very interested in learning and obtaining as much information as they can. And that's exciting. I love to see that.
I agree. And this phrase, and I'm not going to quote it exactly. And it may not even come from you, Spap. I can't remember. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but this phrase, doing what your peers do in the common course of business. Does that ring a bell at all? I mean, this is something I learned years and years ago, right?
Yeah. What your peers' actions would be in a similar sign. Yeah.
How do we even know?
Yeah, many times we don't. Many times we don't, and that's a reason we need to come together.
Yeah.
We many years ago here in my local community, we had a group of FHA appraisers. There were 4 or 5 of us, and we would meet on Saturday mornings for breakfast.
Yeah.
And we would trade data and exchange ideas, and it was great. It was one Saturday a month and just a couple hours. And yes, we were competitors,
right?
But we were friendly competitors. And that finally died out. And I talked to a guy a few years later, and I said, that old little breakfast club we had, we ought to do that. And he's like, yeah, set it up. And so we did it. And I just invited every appraiser in the county. We had like 30 appraisers show up.
Wow.
And it was great. We did that for a little while, and then it kind of died out again, but yeah, appraisers definitely need to come together. I think if we collaborate and we network, not only can we share and exchange ideas, like I was talking about the trainees having that conversation on Clubhouse, right? I have a trainee down in Atlanta, not mine, who I mean, she has just fallen all over herself thanking us for the knowledge that she's obtained from just sitting in a Clubhouse room for an hour. She's like, I'm getting so much information from you guys. And when we started out, Dustin, you didn't have that. Did you have the ability to sit in a room and have somebody with 40 years of experience talk to you? Did you have an opportunity to have a conversation with Fannie Mae or Freddie? The other day, I had one of the main guys at Freddie Mac in the room. I had 3 representatives from Fannie Mae in the room. There's appraisers that have spent their entire career and never had an opportunity to ask a question of Fannie Mae. And with technology and advancement, we have those opportunities these days that we haven't had in the past. So I'm excited about it.
I am too. I love the direction that we're going as a culture, as human beings. I see the same thing that you're talking about, where individuals are thirsting for knowledge. They're more willing to put themselves out there and ask the hard questions. And more importantly, I'm seeing that other appraisers are more willing to be able to put their ego aside a little bit and answer those questions, which brings me, of course, to the question that always comes up, from the very beginning of appraisal. It's always been, why can't we have more influence and power and ability to overcome some of these crazy regulations and some of the things that we, the real challenges that we have to overcome. Brian, where are we with that? I mean, you look at real estate agents, for example, and they've got the National Association of Realtors, and I know as appraisers we're part of that, and there's representation there. Mm-hmm. My good friend Craig Morley is on that panel right now, and he represents us well. But in the overall scheme of things, we really don't have the power that we need to have.
Yeah. I was appointed to the valuation committee this year, so I'm on that committee with NAR as well, and they have the numbers. They're such a huge organization. They can really get some things done, and that's what we need to do as appraisers. I mean, the first thing is just get involved. So Dustin, I served on the 2020 ANSI committee, right? Yeah. And they're making some changes, and one of those changes, I thought, oh no, please don't. Right. And so we did a couple of podcasts. I know articles got written about this potential change, and the appraisal community responded. We had 44 public comments, with 40 of them being on this particular topic. And there's no question in my mind that committee changed directions as a consequence of the public, mostly appraisers, the public commentary. So you can make a difference if you get involved. I'm heavily involved with the NAA. I have been since its inception. I created the Appraiser Relief Fund because I was having an interview with a gentleman just like you and I are right now. And I interviewed him on a podcast, and his community had suffered a hurricane. Mm-hmm. Well, it's an audio, podcasts are audio. So, but I was looking at him like you and I were looking at it. I saw the emotion and the devastation on this man's face. And I said, we're going to do something. And I kept hitting these roadblocks. But then fortunately, the NAA, we created the Appraiser Relief Fund. We've got over $18,000 set aside right now to help appraisers across the country in their time of need. That's incredible. That's appraisers coming together to get good things done. And I'm convinced if we do come together, we can move mountains. So let's move some mountains. I'm ready.
Love it, my friend. How do people get a hold of you?
Very easy. I'm not going to give my cell phone. I got to quit doing that.
Yeah, don't do that.
But my office number is 270-302-8866, or real simple, Bryan, that's with a Y, Bryan at appraiserelearning.com.
And I'd be remiss if we didn't remind there's a couple of great places to connect with Bryan and his team. Of course, Appraiser eLearning. You need to be on there, and of course his podcast, Appraisal Update. You can find that, I assume, on iTunes and Stitcher and all of that jazz, right?
Yeah. Not as famous as the coach yet. Not quite there yet. And congratulations, by the way. You said 6 years. That's awesome. But yeah, wherever you listen to podcasts, it's available. The Appraisal Update. Yes, sir.
Love it, my friend. Bryan Reynolds, thank you. Let's do it again soon.
Always. And I got to have you back on mine too. So
sounds like a deal.
That's the deal. That's the exchange.
All right, my friend. We'll talk soon, folks. Just a quick shout out for those of you who want to connect on a level that is non-judgmental, very accepting and open. Of course, the All-Star team has our great private group on. Yes, it's on Facebook, not quite as professional as LinkedIn, but it is on Facebook and it is private. People sometimes get confused and they think that if it's on Facebook, it's open for everybody to see and hear. No, it's just the intimate group of All-Star team members who have opportunities to ask questions. More importantly, to answer questions in a very non-judgmental and very safe environment. So, hope you'll join us there. Thank you again to my good friend Bryan, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.